On the Common Link Theory, CLT, PhD, Mcgill University, 2006. Ibn al-Qayyim was asked, is there a criterion by which we would be able to distinguish to know whether a hadith is fabricated without even examining its isnad? He responded that it is possible for the traditionists to do so, since they have spent enough time gaining expertise in hadith, learning intimate details about the Prophet's life and sayings, distinguishing between sound and unsound hadiths. He added, would not be an easy task for those who simply imitate their school of law without studying the Sunnah themselves. Ibn al-Qayyim devoted his Al-Manar al-Munif to answering this question. He listed criteria used to determine what factors effectively discount the authenticity of a hadith, and provided several examples for each of them. The following points of criteria are a select few from Ibn al-Qayyim's detailed work on the criticism of isnad. 1. If the hadith consists of exaggerations that the Prophet does not usually say, for instance, whoever says La ilaha illallah will be rewarded with a bird with 70 tongues, each tongue speaking 70,000 languages, all of them praying for him. 2. If the hadith contradicts reality, it is a fabrication. Examples of this are the claim that eggplant cures fever, or he who sneezes while talking is being truthful. These two hadiths are fabricated because eating eggplant does not cure fever, and many liars sneeze when they talk, but this does not indicate that they are being honest. 3. When the hadith contradicts what has been precisely stated in the Sunnah, such as calling for injustice or unfairness, or if it praises wrongdoing, then it would be considered fabricated. When the hadith predicts something will happen at a certain date or time, then it is fabricated. For instance, in the year so-and-so or in the month so-and-so, something will happen. If the hadith contradicts the teaching of the prophets, for instance, worship God by staring at beautiful faces. Not only in Schacht's work, but in Schachtian scholarship generally, there lies a tendency to split the isnads of one particular hadith, and then to study those isnads separately, as if they are referring to different hadiths. Following Juynboll's steps, Mcgill separated the isnads of one hadith because he found differences in the wordings of the matan. This methodology was applied in his article The Murder of Ibn Abi Luhayk, wherein 4 isnads, shahids of one hadith, were studied separately. Mcgill regarded Abu Ishaq as the common link for the tradition of Al-Bara, the well-known Medinan scholar Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri as the common link for the tradition of Ibn Ka'ab, Abdullah ibn Unais as the common link for the tradition in this hadith, and Ibn Lahiya as the common link for the tradition of Urwa. In analysing the tradition of Ka'ab, Mcgill described the transmitter from al-Zuhri to be a partial common link, stating that among these transmitters from al-Zuhri are 4 partial common links. Now, if we apply Mcgill's analysis of partial common links to the highest level in the isnad of this hadith, then the 4 traditions of Al-Bara, Ibn Ka'ab, Abdullah ibn Unais and Urwa should be considered partial common links, and the highest common link would be the Prophet himself. Although there are a few differences between these hadiths, they should still be considered one hadith with various wordings of the matan. Marston explains this case in his article, Look at the variant readings in the hadith, when he compares the case of the hadith with the Hellenistic rhetoricians. In his article, he asserts that the combination of the evidence and the striking features of variant readings provoke the assumption that these scholars who are qualified to transmit hadith paraphrase and use the same methodological tools as those described by Hellenistic rhetoricians for the construction of law. But there is no evidence that the transmitters of hadith were trained in Hellenistic rhetoric. Therefore, Marston concludes, the similarities between the two systems of expression reflect Aristotle's statement that rhetoric is within the cognizance of all men and not confined to any special science. The 4th reason for Schacht's inability to provide an effective methodology. 4. Flaws in Schacht's methodology. Critical analysis gone awry. In Schacht's 2 main works, Origins and Introduction, 3 critical methodological problems related to this common link theory may be identified. These problems are related to A. the sources, and B. his general assumptions regarding the formation of Islamic law, and the evidence used to support these assumptions, and C. the contradiction between the traditionists and secular historians' methods. A. the sources. The sources problem branches out into several elements. First of all, Schacht does not rely on sufficient references, resulting in an anachronistic characterization of Islamic law, where a part is confusedly said to represent the whole of the tradition. This shortcoming is clearly articulated by Coulson, who recognised Schacht's undue reliance upon the work of a Shafi'i, and the fact that the whole picture of early Islamic law that emerges from Schacht's research, including the subjects relating to Hadith, reflects his massive focus. Indeed, the Origins is best characterised as a study of a Shafi'i, and it's through a Shafi'i's eyes that Schacht sees the Islamic movement of Hadith during the 2nd century after the Hijrah. As Ghulaym avers, this lack of reference is one of the major problems marring his Origins. The amount of reading and research which lies behind this study is enormous, and Dr. Schacht deserves the gratitude of all Islamic scholars. I hope it is not graceless to suggest that if he had given us a full index and the substance of his countless references to Shafi'i's works, he would have saved us the labour of looking them up for ourselves. Hence, despite the wide range of sources read by Schacht, he did not provide footnotes to his claims. Relying on one source alone, Shafi'is, for the study of a particular subject becomes more problematic when so many other sources dealing with the same subject exist. Scholar, addressing the issue of Schacht's narrow choice of sources, calls for a re-evaluation of his assertions on Islamic legal theory. In his study of this issue, when discussing the Hadith of Musa, Scholar states, "Since many new sources of Musa material have come to light and have been made accessible in recent years, and since recent research has been strongly challenged or even wholly refuted Schacht's theories, the time seems to be ripe for a renewed examination of the Muntakhab." Scholar provides an example showing how much the appraisal of a tradition can change with the first publication of works that have more traditions parallel to those traditions known in Schacht's time. Several other scholars have pointed out the opaque and seriously limited nature of source references used in Schacht's major works. Among these thinkers, Ittar mentions that contemporary scholars are producing critical editions of manuscripts that were written during the first half of the 2nd century after the Hijrah and were previously unavailable to Schacht. For instance, the Jami of Ma'mar ibn Rashid, who died in 154, Sufyan al-Thawri 161, Hisham ibn Hassan 148, Ibn Jurayj 150, among others. J. W. Fuchs provides another example demonstrating the effect of insufficient sources on our understanding of the CLT. Fuchs states that, according to Schacht's knowledge, when all chains of Hadith narrators show a particular common bias in the 2nd century, that basis should be held responsible for fabricating the Hadith. Schacht did not, however, take into consideration that only a small portion of tradition material has come down to us. In other words, the transmitter, who seemed to be the only narrator of the Hadith, might be supported by others referenced in yet to be published works, as explained earlier in this chapter. However, Schacht's limited access to published material on Hadith, in addition to his lack of expertise in handling it, led to him making erroneous conclusions. Some contemporary studies on Hadith, like those of Ittar, Manhaj al-Naqd, and al-Zahrani, Mawqif Ahl al-Ahwa, and Baha'uddin in his book dedicated to the discussion of Orientalists and Hadith, Al-Mustashrikeen wal-Hadith, conclude that the failure of Schacht's project was a result of his using somewhat irrelevant sources such as Al-Risala and Al-Muwatta, which are considered to be fiqh books, or at least not strictly works of Hadith. Stay tuned for many more parts.